The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
Now this wraps up the discussion of interface design notations, and I want to say a couple more final words on usability in the real world, because you'll be going out, you've heard DIS1, so you're now expert designers of user interfaces by definition. And once you enter a sort of a company as the head of usability or something, you will then run into curious sort of crosswinds and counter effects to what you're trying to do. Norman talks about this in the end of his book. There's an appendix that is actually new for the new version that's like 2-3 years old now. And one of the things he talks about is there are basically the various competitive forces that come up. A lot of manufacturers today clearly see the ways they can compete in price, features, and quality, and that's an order, right? That's a priority. So competing by price, of course, is a valid way to compete, but it makes it hard for you to argue the case in a design process for a product to say, let's put some extra time into getting the user interface to be as good as possible. The other thing that often gets in the way is that the business might actually try to design a product to be purchased by people who make the purchasing decision for the product, and those people may not be the end users. Classic example would be SAP. You're never selling SAP to a secretary. You're selling it to the IT team in a large university in North Rhine-Westphalia that I don't want to name. And then the people who actually end up in the offices and need to work with it on a daily basis are not the same ones that made the purchasing decision and the decision on what features should go where and how the user interface should work. So this also makes it hard to argue the case for usability because as a company, you're not selling to people for whom that is even a big concern. They're not aware that this could be important. Then, of course, there's the whole issue of creeping featureism. People buy stuff by the amount of features, even if they don't really need them. And even if you do have a chance to address the needs of your user base, you may often face the problem that, this is supposed to be a product used in a company, and I had this case a couple of months ago. They wanted to write a piece of software in a company, and it was supposed to be used in a logistics setting, both by the people who are out on the tarmac as on an airport, tagging parcels, and also by the guy who is sitting in his back office and reviewing the quarterly performance. I was like, those are very different scenarios. You probably need 2 different user interfaces and application designs here for these 2. And they're like, but that's expensive. Yes, it is, but otherwise you're not going to get it right for these diverse users, right? So that's often a challenge you're going to face, and that is hard to resolve. Another thing that can bite you is we've talked about the DIA cycle, and that assumes basically that you can do a design, prototype it, test it, and then feedback, and you do that until you get it right, and that's great. And once you're done with that version and you've put that version out, you can say, when I start my next version, I can learn from all the mistakes I made in the prototyping of that first version. The problem is that in the real world, especially with things like cars or planes or like those things that take a long time to develop, the development and design for the next model generation already starts while the current one is still in the process of being completed. So you may actually, I don't know, you're designing a jumbo jet, right? So you're learning, oh my God, what a bad idea it was to design the air vents for the passengers in this way. And you learn that by, I don't know, fairly final user testing shortly before you go into production. There's no way you can make that design decision, change that decision in the design even for the next generation. So you are in a long latency here where it's hard to fix these things. It's going to take a long time. The CEO of Amazon put it nicely, how to address these issues. And Amazon isn't exactly a unsuccessful in satisfying customers. And they said, the CEO said that they are simply customer obsessed. So they ignored their competition for the most part. They ignored traditional marketing requirements. And they mostly focused on very simple, extremely customer-driven questions and needs. So if you can make that happen, if you can get that sort of approach into a company or into a particular product team, that's great. But not always will you find that understanding base. I personally like to refer to this effect as transitive sort of, it's kind of like I need to sort of transitive education. So basically, I go to a customer as a consultant for usability issues, and the customer is like a software house, right? That's supposed to develop a product for somebody else. And I explain usability to them, and they're like, yeah, usability, we're going to do it this way. And then they go to their customer, and they say, we've got this awesome new idea. And then their customer's like, well, I don't understand, right? That doesn't make sense to me. I want it cheap and fast and lots of features. So then we need to go and explain to that customer why they actually are going to benefit from an approach that is more centered on usability than on just getting something out quickly. So that's sort of this transitive teaching that you need to sometimes do until all stakeholders that are involved are actually signed up to do it this way.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.